All right.
Hi, Greg. How you doing?
Hey, Hugh, how's it going tonight?
Oh, not bad. I wanted to give you some new information in a roundabout way about my wife's murder and CBS and the White House and how they murdered my wives. Um, I'm going to change my background.
All the blurs are a little distracting. Kind of are. I can see that.
Well, I'm going to put up a video of my farm where they murdered my wives.
Right.
And this is it here.
Okay.
This is where I lived with Terry. I bought this Civil War ranch from Mr. Manning via Woody at Toy Story. In 2002, because two off-duty policemen had kidnapped her out of her CPS office, and she asked me to help her. So I bought her this Civil War ranch because she had been married to the oldest living Civil War soldier on Earth. And some Italian guys set me up with Woody as Toy Story came out. And Woody was representing Mr. Manning in Carolina, Senator Graham's state. And they set me up on this at a price I couldn't refuse. I moved on to it. You can see the cows in the background over here.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 30 acres next to Walmart distribution in Midway, Tennessee.
Okay.
So I bought this ranch and flew down and rented a semi, and I moved Terry from in front of the Army base on McKeel's Drive in Menominee, Wisconsin, to this Civil War ranch. And then 6 months later, she was murdered after telling me two people were stalking her. And you can see that barn behind me where the cows are gathered there.
Mm-hmm.
She told me that's where the stalkers were coming from, was out of that barn.
Mm-hmm.
And they would hide out in there and wait for her to walk her dog, and then they'd attack her. And they called her death a suicide. When I found her hung in her dog's leash, she took her dogs out for a walk, and then she was hung in her dog's leash in our garage. And about 5 minutes after telling me somebody was stalking her. I don't believe the suicide BS report. And when Victoria was murdered 7 years later on the same ranch, I know it wasn't natural causes, and I know Victoria didn't commit suicide. We were attacked in our home. Our home was shot at. Some bikers I knew from Michigan built a bike club down at the end of the street here. And then I started having problems with renegades, outlaws, and a guy named Shovel from Michigan. And I'm going to let this video run, and I'm going to share a screen here and show some more pictures of this ranch. If I can. There it is. This is the back of the ranch. Can you see this?
Okay. Sure can, yeah.
Okay. And then I'm going to just start scrolling through and talking about it. This was part of my backyard. And my backyard went all the way to the highway there. There's a truck route. I can't remember what name it is. It goes from Virginia all the way through Tennessee. It's a truck route. And this is Mossheim. Truckers who know the area, they'll know the name of that highway. I forget it. It's been too long. There's that old barn where people were stalking Terry from. They would sit in that barn and wait for her to walk her dog, and then they'd harass her. And this is my backyard, and those are real chestnut trees, the kind you can eat. Well, there were two of them there, and there's very few real chestnut trees left in America. Those are two of them. And Terry planted all these flowers. These are roses. That's an old car I bought. And there's my van. It was a custom van, Chevy van. More of my backyard. There's the house itself, and you can see it's a 2-car garage. And that 2-car garage, that's where Terry was hung.
Mm-hmm.
And the back door was open, and she was hung on her dog's leash.
Mm.
She took her dog out for a walk about 9 p.m. And these are just different views of my Civil War ranch here on Snake Road. This is actually Grassy Creek, and part of the ranch is on Snake Road. And across the street is Midway, which is home of Walmart distribution. The Clintons. And there's the house, my driveway, my backyard. And I bought this place and moved Terry onto it. And the guy, Woody, that sold it to me, he was taking care of 2 black kids in the middle of Tennessee back then. And I don't think anybody wanted to help him. He made a commission on this when I purchased it. And that commission is what he fed the 2 little black kids with. Mm-hmm. And that's a shed in my backyard for the tractor. That's the 2 chestnut trees, and that's off to the side. And you can see that house way over there. There's a car sitting there on this day, but the woman that lived there, she died, so I had no neighbors. And then I'm going to back up here. That tree there, I and Terry planted, and we planted trees all around the house. This was Terry's kitchen, that oak table and chairs and the night Scotchman and the chandelier and the clock and everything in that room. That was Terry's belongings I brought from Wisconsin. Terry actually refinished that oak table in her garage in Wisconsin, and I brought it down in a semi I rented. She had a big house, and her furniture filled the semi, and that's the furniture we put in this house. And you can see that was our den off the kitchen, and then that was the looking out the back patio, glass sliding doors. There was a patio with sliding doors. And these pictures were taken when we first moved in. And that was Terry's candle holder, and the little tree there. Can you see my mouse?
Sure can.
That little tree there is Terry planted that with me one day. We planted 5 trees in the front yard. And this Virgin Mary was from my great grandmother in Europe. And we put this rock garden up around this tree. And her and I collected rocks out of the yard and built a little rock garden, and she planted flowers there. And then see, here's a tree we planted, and here's a tree we planted. Mm-hmm. And then this was our living room. And This was Terry's lamp and her end tables.
Mhm.
This was my picture from the Tribune. You remember, I'm in front of a photo in the Chicago Tribune.
Yeah, of course.
That's the photo.
Okay.
It's actually an oil painting, and I brought it from my home in Sterling Heights, Michigan. When I moved to Tennessee, I took it with me after my parents died. I had bought that painting for my mother on Mother's Day, I believe.
Hmm.
And there's one of Terry's clock. Terry used to like going to flea markets in Wisconsin, and she'd buy all these clocks and different knickknacks. Those were Terry's garlic and her radio. And I put these air conditioning units in. And this picture here is Victoria's wheelchair. And this is after Terry was murdered. And then I went and picked up Victoria and moved Victoria into the same house. Victoria was in a wheelchair all her life, so I bought her that wheelchair. And Terry's belongings were still up in the house. This is one of Terry's antiques from a flea market she had hung on a wall. And that was Terry's computer desk, cherry wood. You see, that was a $5,000 computer desk there.
Mhm.
Another room, another air conditioner, and then I'd play music in this corner of the house. And that was Terry's iron. And that was a camera I bought. That camera is what's running the video behind me right now, behind my picture on the right.
Mhm.
And then you see these, my mouse, if you look over here, these are Terry's plate collection, and they were worth a fortune. They were from, they were handmade plates from Denmark, and she would collect them.
Hmm.
And she'd pay, $500,000-$600,000 a plate. She had 20 or 30 plates like that, and she made these shelves to put them on.
Hmm.
And this is another shelf Terry made, and she made this. Terry liked to work with wood when she wasn't working at her Head Start and CPS office. That's what she did as a hobby.
It's talented. Mhm.
There's the backyard from another view, and you can see how far back it goes. I mean, you couldn't see the end of the property.
Yeah.
That was my clothesline I put up when we first moved in. And that property went back past those trees all the way to a highway. That's just a dragonfly on my porch. Pretty dragonfly, huh?
Yeah.
And these are flowers Terry planted. She planted flowers everywhere. She liked to plant flowers that would attract hummingbirds.
Mhm.
And you can see here's another tree we planted, and there's a tree we planted here. And then you can see Terry started all these plants all over the place. And these are more of her plants. And then I started a garden. We went to a flea market, and I bought a rototiller and a tractor, and I started plowing, and there I put in a big garden.
Mhm.
You can see it here.
Yep.
And Terry never got to eat out of that garden. She was hung in her dog's leash before anything was finished growing.
Hmm.
This picture here with the onions going to seed, this is after she was dead. And you can see I just stopped working on everything. Well, the pictures just scrolled. You see I put in a fairly decent sized garden. And there's that old barn from the garden I put in. And then this back here we used as like a park. These trees grew up pretty big in the summer, and we would just go out there and lay a blanket out and use it as a park. And see, I had a fireplace inside.
Yep.
And then this is how secluded it was where I lived. And there's no neighbors. My nearest neighbor was a half a mile away.
Yeah, it's easy to see why they would set you up there.
Yeah, that was easy to see. And you go down this road for a mile before you get to my house. And just behind me where I'm driving here, they made a biker club. And then this is the back, this is coming up to my house. And then I'm back at Terry's flower garden again. But Terry loved planting flowers, and she planted them everywhere.
Yeah, I see.
And she was fixing this place up really nice. And then Terry had a Taurus, and this was my Taurus and my truck. And I borrowed $1,000 from Wells Fargo when we first got here. And they used the titles from that new Taurus and that new Chevy custom van. And I paid the loan off a year and a half early, and they never gave my titles back to me, Wells Fargo. And that's exactly what they did to me when the FBI detained me for Jimmy Hoffa's murder. Whitey had sold me a car, didn't give me a title, and then they tried to tell me I buried Hoffa in a car. And then in Tennessee, Wells Fargo did the very same thing. They never gave me back the titles to my two vehicles, and those were new vehicles back then.
Is that because maybe they were trying to make it look like you stole it or something?
Those two, they claimed I didn't pay them, and I paid them cash. I paid them back in cash a year and a half early.
Wow.
I paid the whole loan off with cash because I wasn't a poor person.
Yeah.
A poor person couldn't fly to Wisconsin, buy a second house, rent a semi, and move a girl back to Tennessee. I wasn't poor.
Right.
Wells Fargo kept the title for that Taurus and the title for that custom van, and together those two cars cost me almost $100,000. So when they didn't give me back the titles, I couldn't even sell them. They became worthless. I ended up giving them to a junkyard years later. And I still didn't have the title back from Wells Fargo, and they did that to me on purpose.
Well, obviously, right.
And you can see Terry was planting her flowers. She liked to plant hollyhocks everywhere because they attracted hummingbirds.
Okay.
And you can see my coffee cup over here. Actually, that was probably Terry's coffee cup. She was probably planting that day and left her coffee on the front porch. This was Terry's toolbox. She would carry her garden stuff around, her shovel and rake and stuff like that. And all this stuff, even the flour and this, I had transported back from her home in Wisconsin, Menominee, Wisconsin, on McHale Street in front of the Army base. And in my life, that is a coincidence because my brother Michael lost his heels hitting a landmine in Vietnam years earlier. And my brother Michael raped Kiki, or I would have never been in Tennessee to begin with. My brother Michael raped my wife in front of our children. I shouldn't say my wife. She was my fiance, and we planned on getting married in a week or two. And while I was working at Premier Networks, before Art Bell existed, his wife divorced him. I found him walking down Groesbeck, and he didn't have any feet because he hit a landmine in Vietnam. And I handed him the keys to my car. I was in my work truck. I picked him up, handed him the keys to my car, gave him my car and the key to my house. told him to go to my home and he could sleep in a room there. And that night he raped my wife in front of our children. And that's why eventually I moved to Tennessee. I stayed long enough to put him in a mental home, a state mental facility. Karen, who was raped by him, didn't want to put him in a jail. So we decided, well, we'll get him some mental help. But that his raping her in front of the children ruined our marriage. We didn't get married. And I gotta look at some things here. I just had an alarm go off and I got to take a pill and I want to look at something before I do. I'm sorry, bear with me, Greg.
It's all right.
Let's see, Terry and I, we'd come out and sit on the porch and watch the fireflies in Tennessee and light a candle, and that would attract them.
Mm-hmm.
And there were thousands of fireflies and hummingbirds all over from our flowers. Sure. We had a nice life here.
Mm-hmm.
Until the police come back and murdered her.
Mm-hmm.
And those same two off-duty cops that kidnapped her out of her CPS office in Wisconsin, I honestly believe they're the people who murdered her in her dog's leash. In Greene County, the police there, they wrote down she committed suicide, and I know she didn't commit suicide because we were going to get married. It's something I know. All right, I'm stuck. So anyways, you see, Terry, she liked to plant ivy and flowers all over the place. And there's the Virgin Mary that I brought from my mother and father's house. And there's the flowers starting to grow in the rock garden Terry and I made. Mm-hmm. And see her trees getting bigger. And this was a huge place. It had a full basement. The only bad thing about this was it was in the middle of nowhere.
Right, by design. That's why they put you there.
Yeah, that's why they offered it to me, so they could murder my wives here.
Yeah.
And this was the Manning Properties.
Explain Manning and Woody for those that don't know.
Well, Woody, he was raising two black children, and he got a percentage of what my purchase was, and he raised the black children with that. Woody was a white man. And Disney made me baby Huey at birth. I went to church with Disney at Methodist churches. I published Disney's songs, and I sang Disney's songs on the radio at church with James Taylor and the whole congregation on the radio every Sunday. Woody is the cowboy from Toy Story. Mm-hmm. This Italian guy came, and when he knew I started, I didn't go to him. Terry called me and asked me for help. So I started quietly looking for a house to put her in. And somebody came to me and gave me this house. And it was a price I couldn't, it was a really good price. So I took it. And I flew to Wisconsin, moved Terry here. 6 months later, she was dead. just before we were going to be married. And she wasn't sad that day. She made love to me for 2 days. She was hung on my birthday, July 4th. Terry wouldn't hang herself on my birthday. She was making me a birthday cake. And everything done to me here, you'll see it when I get to the end of this video. It all fits in with a government sting.
Mm-hmm.
And the sting is all about Manning co-created the JFK archives, and the JFK archives are all lies. Everybody in the JFK
who was Mr. Manning to you, Hugh?
Everybody in the JFK archives who framed Oswald, who was dating Baker, and I'm the Baker family, were my neighbors in Michigan, all of them. Garrison was my alumni in Warren, Michigan. I taught school with Garrison. Garrison and Manning co-created the JFK archives. These are not coincidences. No more coincidences than Woody of Toy Story and Mr. Manning in South Carolina, Senator Graham's state, setting me up on this farm, and then they murdered 4 of my wives. 2 of them on this farm.
Yeah.
Manning was the person who owned this property, period. And it's a Civil War ranch. It's the Battle of Blue Springs in the Civil War. Terry was married to the oldest living Civil War soldier on earth, and she had his son. Her son, Jason, died on his 18th birthday on the day he graduated in a car she bought her. He sat in the car, drove it 2 minutes down the street, and the police come to the house and told Terry her son was dead. A rock fell out of the mountains and crushed him in his car. That's the story she was told. She never believed that. Then 2 off-duty policemen kidnapped her out of her CPS office. They trashed her office, drove her across 5 state lines. She escaped them, called me and told me I was the only person on earth she trusted, and asked me to help her. I bought this property, flew to Wisconsin, and moved her onto it after she escaped the 2 off-duty cops. Off-duty cops kidnapped her out of a CPS office as she was protecting little kids from a pornography pedo gang. 1 kid was 2 and the other kid was 7. And they were using them in porno. Unreal. It was her job to protect them. I'm just continuing the slideshow. And all of this is the property I rented. Dolly Parton's, you see the grass is half cut here? Dolly Parton's cousin, the Tweed family, he would come and cut my grass every week. And he knows that they murdered his mother in the same hospital they murdered Terry and Vicky in. In the jewelry, there's a place called Don Smith's Jewelry Exchange, and he's like where everybody goes to exchange their gold and jewelry. And they murdered his mother in the same hospital.
Do you know why or anything?
And both, what's that, Greg?
Do you know why that they murdered her?
They do that to all kinds of people there. And these people, they don't stand up. They'll look at you right in the face and they'll say, there's nothing you can do about it. They murdered my mother. They murdered my wife. And none of them stand up for themselves. If any one of them would have stood up for themselves, they couldn't have murdered Terry and Vicky in Johnson City, Tennessee, and in Greenville, Tennessee. They don't stand up for each other. Nobody helps me, Greg. The sheriff in Greenville tells me he can't help it if the government's crooked and hires hitmen to kill people in hospitals. That's what the Greenville sheriff tells me. And all of his police officers use fake badges and names on my murder reports and on all the break-ins in my home leading up to Victoria's murder. They use fake names. And then the chief of police in Greenville tells me he can't help it if the government is crooked. He didn't open a murder case. Victoria's dead, Terry's dead, my lawyers are dead, and he didn't open a murder case. He can't help it if the government's crooked. And he was talking about Obama's government. So then
he was crooked
I
too.
go to Johnson City where Victoria was murdered. And the sheriff there tells me, well, I'm going to just leave it up to God.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he told me. Instead of opening a murder case, and I have evidence she was murdered. And I went to the police station while she was still alive and asked them to check on her. And they used fake names and badge numbers in Johnson City, Tennessee also. In Johnson City looks right at me and he says, well, let's just leave this murder up to God. And he didn't open a murder report. It's unbelievable. And then nobody helps me. I had to go to the DA and hound the DA myself after my attorney was murdered on his way to the DA to file murder charges. And you'll see at the end of this, I'll show you, I have the proof that CBS and Major Tom Garrett murdered my attorney and destroyed my income.
Right.
And I'm not afraid to say it. I want them to take me to court. After they murdered Victoria and my lawyer and destroyed my income, he was handed a good job on a new CBS show called The Takeout after murdering two of my wives. It's unbelievable. Well, I'm sure he got a big raise after destroying my life on this farm. And I'm never going to back down from that statement. I'm going to hound him till he dies. Number one, the Constitution that my family authored. It says that the military cannot come onto my property. They have no right there. And in my life, the military keeps coming onto my property and murdering my family. My whole family's been murdered 5 times by military operatives in the U.S. military. And there's no lie in this. And that's so illegal, it's pathetic. And then when I realized that the senators in the White House hired them as hitmen to do this, and then the he can't help it. One tells me he can't help it if the government's crooked. The other one tells me, well, let's just leave the murders up to God. Neither one of them are doing their job. And then I'm left here with no justice. My whole family's been murdered 5 times in 68 years. 5 times, Greg.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a whole lot of people screaming for justice for a whole lot less. It's unbelievable.
I get no justice for my whole family's been murdered 5 times. They just murdered 3 more of my kids as I sat in L. Brooks Patterson's office. And you know this.
Yeah. Yeah, TR's kid and Kiki's
and you
kid.
see, look at the pine tree in front of my house, Greg.
Say it. Yep.
Just like at my father's home in Michigan.
Interesting.
It's not coincidence.
No, that was the sign where that said
9/11 Twin
116 on
Pines.
it. Yeah, upside down.
Back to the
9/11.
Future, and John DeLorean was my neighbor and friend.
Right.
Yeah. You see the Twin Pines? They set me up on the same
They thought it through really good, didn't they? It's
Yeah,
unreal.
just like they set my father up at Divco where he made milk trucks.
Yeah. Twin Pines Dairy.
And I own the patents on the vans, the milk trucks, and the buses at birth.
Wow.
And there's the Twin Pines. You see them right there, Greg.
I see it. I do. That's amazing.
See it?
Yeah.
That's not coincidence.
No, no, there's no way. Not
That's my
after.
front yard. There's Terry. Terry brought this.
Mhm.
She loved planting flowers. She was a really nice person.
Yeah.
She didn't hurt anybody. They murdered her. That's all she did was spend her days planting flowers, period. All over the place. If I tried to cut down a tree, she'd say, no, don't do that. That might be a person. She believed that all nature was people after they're dead. She was a really nice person, Greg. And she even converted her old toolbox into a flower garden. The flowers didn't bloom yet, but that's what she did. And none of this bloomed until we planted that, and she was dead 2 weeks later.
Wow.
See that tree? Planting trees all over the place. That's all she ever wanted to do was plant flowers and trees. See the whole front of the house?
Yeah.
After she died, it was beautiful.
Hmm.
And she didn't kill herself.
No. Clearly.
And that's just me taking pictures around the house. And you see, there's the corn growing, and I let the weeds take over after they murdered her. I could care less about a garden. They murdered my wife.
Yeah.
And then when you see these trees big, see how it's big here, tall? I was living there alone, just taking pictures of what was left. And you can see I have no neighbors. And 2 people were stalking Terry every time she walked her dog. See that van? All custom inside, Greg. I got it from the auto show. A lot of money. I paid cash for it.
Yeah.
See the rototiller I bought?
Yeah.
I bought that with Terry. And I was planting that whole garden, and they murdered her. And this gets even deeper, Greg.
Oh, I know it does. I'm aware.
Well, when I get to the end of this, you'll see. You'll really be aware. See, I made mounds, and I was putting in melon plants, carrots. And I had it real nice here. So I picked up that tractor. And see, I'm in the middle of nowhere with people stalking my wives, police and bikers stalking my wives, and they were hired to murder them.
Probably by those policemen in Wisconsin, right?
No, by the government. The government doesn't want the world to know the truth of who really killed the Kennedy family. When I was 4.
See.
On the same day Admiral Byrd was murdered.
Right.
And they tell you he died of a heart attack, and that's a big lie. He was murdered. I and my twin were kidnapped. My father's hands were cut off. He served in the Navy under Admiral Byrd with Kennedy. And my wife's fathers all served in the Navy with Kennedy. This is one great big cover-up, Greg.
Unbelievable, yeah.
And you see there's the Virgin Mary, and there's all the flowers Terry planted. See it?
Yeah, sure do.
And people in Tennessee, they don't like us Catholics. All we did was stay to ourselves.
Right. Yeah.
I and Terry, I moved her here. We planned on getting married, stay to ourselves, and they murdered her to harass me. You see, that's a birdhouse behind the bug light. Mm-hmm. And I had to put it up there because a bee nest built itself in Terry's birdhouse. Mm-hmm. So I put that bug zapper up there and killed all the bees, and then the birds moved back in again. But that's a birdhouse Terry built. Terry liked to build things with wood. That's what she did as a hobby. You see that tree, those 2 trees there? The one on the right was 8 feet in diameter. It was like 30 feet around. A tornado knocked it onto the house after Terry was murdered. Took out the corner of the house. And these are the chestnut trees. Those are real chestnuts that you can roast on an open fire, just like the song. And you can't find those trees anymore. All the chestnut trees are poisonous. Those 2 were real chestnut trees.
Wow. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, a lot of people don't. And then see the cows? Mm-hmm. We had chickens. Roosters, cows. We had a nice life there, Greg.
Sure.
And there's the garden before I planted it. The grass cut. That's where the grass was cut. Mm-hmm. It was a nice place. And they put me on it just so they could murder my wives.
Yeah.
You see those lightning rods? I put those up on top of the house because lightning come right through my house one day, right in front of me.
Well, that sounds scary.
So I put up 4 lightning rods on top of the house. Yeah, it was very scary. Lightning came right through the whole house.
Wow.
That far from my face. I installed lightning rods. And then a tornado come through and took those 2 trees out I showed you. And those trees were so tall, they fell on the back of the house. They fell on the back of this side of the house and took the back bed where I slept. But that was after Terry was dead. You see, there's the birdhouse Terry built, and there was other birdhouses over this way. And that's what she would just work with wood as a hobby. Now here we go. Greg, I'm an eBay. Look at eBay. Congratulations. You've achieved eBay top rated seller status. I had a
Yep.
computer business on eBay and I was the very top. And there's no lie in this. People will say I copied it. No, I didn't. Here it is. You
Yeah,
see
right
it?
there. I see it. Yep.
It's the real thing.
Yeah.
I had top seller status, a computer business on eBay. That's all I paid for this ranch. They murdered my wife and my attorney, and they destroyed my eBay business.
Yeah.
See it?
Rated seller status, our highest standard for extraordinary customer service. We're pleased to award the certificate of achievement in recognition of your outstanding efforts to consistently provide the best customer experiences in eBay marketplace.
Major Tom Garrett was sending me FBI computers from the White House. He was the CBS journalist in Obama's White House in Washington, D.C. He was sending me FBI computers, Greg, to that business. Then he wanted to buy some of them back. So I sent them to him. And then he told me that the computers didn't work. And there was nothing at all wrong with the computers. And he destroyed my business.
Yeah.
After my wife, and here, look at, can you read this?
I see it. Thomas Garrett.
At eBay, this is eBay feedback. He destroyed my business. He reported me to the Better Business Bureau, and it was a lie. Everything he said was a lie. Completely destroyed my business, and I was a top seller. He was mad because I didn't leave the same hard and sent them back. And he wanted the old hard drives. So he destroyed my business trying to get the old hard drives, which didn't work. But he wanted the information off them. And then look at, I moved to Tennessee, Greg.
Yeah. Yeah.
And look at the name inside my mailbox.
There it is, Garrett.
The day I moved here, I moved from Tennessee to California, opened my mailbox door, and Garrett's name is inside the mailbox.
That's why they stole the computer.
Tell me that's not a setup.
Yeah, obviously.
So they set me up on a ranch, murder my wives, and then they set me up out in California and write their name in the box, the mailbox. And what just happened to you at the post office?
Yeah, they just stole the computer that I sent to you.
Yeah. Had your book on it. You've been writing it for 4 or 5 years about me, correct? 3 or 4 years.
It would have had parts on it at one time. Now, it wasn't in there presently, but they could have probably...
They can retrieve it, Greg.
Yeah.
I know how to do that.
Yeah. So,
gee, here's my mailbox with Tom Garrett's name inside of it. The moment I moved here.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Yeah. And they do this to me all my life, my whole life through.
Yeah.
And then watch this. This is my wife, Victoria. Her name was Victoria Josephine Mellon. She was from Pennsylvania. Gays murdered her. Osborne's gay friends murdered her in Johnson City. And I don't think it, I know it. I know exactly who murdered her. Her middle name is Josephine. So I owned a ministry and I was supposed to marry the family I moved to California. I was supposed to marry them to a guy who didn't show up for the wedding. Then my wife Victoria's murdered, and the guy that didn't show up, he disappears, and the girl he was going to marry, I asked her, well, when's the wedding? And she says, well, my fiance disappeared. And she tells me, you can move out here if you want and sleep on my couch, because Terry'd been murdered on that farm. Victoria had been dismembered and murdered. The police used fake names and badge numbers. The house was being shot at. I was being attacked by a biker named Shovel. He murdered my wife with the gays in the hospitals. And she asked me, how you doing? I said, terrible. So she has me move out here. I buy a home. Garrett's name is in the mailbox. And then I'm in Josephine County, my wife's middle name. And then watch this, Greg. Remember I told you that Rob called me from the advocate's phone, the Walker phone,
Mm-hmm.
and screamed Slater in it?
Yep.
Watch this. There's Josephine County, and SAR needs your donation to support SAR in their critical missions. So they search. This is search and rescue, SAR. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, gee, look at where the donations go.
The Slater Fire Evacuation Brief.
Tell me this ain't a setup, Greg. And then prior to this, where Judith Vare Baker lives, the sheriff's wife moved in with me and my wife just before my wife was murdered. Remember, the sheriff's wife lived with I and Victoria.
Mm-hmm.
Right after the entire Baker family lived with me.
Yeah.
And then they moved me out here to California, and they used Kathy to lure me here. And now they want me to donate fire money to Slater. And the police, these policemen, they use fake names and badge numbers as they murdered my wives in Tennessee. And my whole life is like this. Al Brooks Patterson did the same thing when they murdered my twin when I was 4 years old. And the government has been doing things like this to me my entire life. And the military is always involved. Major Tom Garrett destroyed my income at my residence. Military is not supposed to be at my residence, let alone murder my wife and my attorneys and 2 judges. And then CBS, who covered Kennedy's murder, Barbara Walters, Slater was screamed over the Walters phone in Tennessee as my wife's throat was slit Halloween Eve by Rob.
Slater Fire, and the Walters wanted you to start fires on their rental apartments.
That's correct.
Amazing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they tried to hire me to burn down their buildings.
Unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. And that's the college, Walters College. It's CBS, and it's had journalists in the White House, in Obama's government and Kennedy's government. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It's all truth. And see, they keep breaking up my video. I got to splice it together now.
Yeah.
And that's why. They don't want anybody knowing my truth. And that's a hell of a lot of truth, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a little piece of it we could take back, Baker, that goes all the way back to investigating Lincoln's murder. I mean, these names have been functioning in the government for such a long time.
Yeah, and they choose to attack me at birth in the 50s. And then they followed me my entire life through, stole all my money, all my businesses, my trademarks, my patents, murdered my family 5 times for $2 trillion. And they're still suppressing me to this day.
Yeah.
and nobody helps me. The sheriffs don't open murder reports. They say, well, we'll leave the murders up to God. They're leaving more than 30 murders up to God in my life. Do you realize that? They say that dismembered women are natural causes.
Yeah, right there on the
Their
report,
ears cut off, their legs cut off, hung in dog leashes. This is natural causes, Greg.
Yeah.
And then, well, we'll just leave the murders up to God, as they use fake names and badge numbers in 2 cities.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't 1 or 2 policemen. It was the entire police force in both cities. Greenville, Tennessee, and Johnson City, Tennessee. And this was, you see the cows walking up to the back?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When Terry and Vicky died, there was a brown cow that was their favorite cow, both women. When Terry died, the cow followed me around all day. When Vicky died, cow followed me around all day. The cows knew they were murdered. You hear what I'm telling you? And this is true.
Yeah.
There's no lie in this. The moment Vicky's throat was slit, a dove this big fell down and hit the ground at my feet. The moment Terry was hung, a dove fell at my feet. There's no lie in this.
That's wild.
And then that brown cow out there in the pasture, it come and broke through the fence and followed me around all day. So even the cow knew they were murdered.
And Terry was really into nature like that. That's interesting.
Yeah. And the next day, I'm not going to go into it. People will think I'm crazy. Nature and people go hand in hand. And when you have a favorite animal and you die, the animal knows it. And I wish somebody like CBS or Tom Garrett would take me to court, but they never do. And as Tom Garrett in Obama's White House murdered my attorney and destroyed my eBay business, and I had to work really hard to become the top seller at eBay with a computer company. I repaired computers and resold them, and I had no complaints until CBS destroyed my income and murdered my attorney. And then they put Tom Garrett on the takeout the next day. He got a new job on the takeout. You understand this?
Yeah, clearly.
It's unbelievable. I wonder how much of a raise they gave him for killing a woman, a little girl in a wheelchair. How much do you think they gave him for killing Victoria in her wheelchair?
Oh, these a-holes make millions and millions a year.
Oh, well, you know, Victoria was sodomized before they murdered her. Her ears were cut off before they murdered her. And then they waited for Halloween Eve and they slit her throat. And she had gay nurses. And this was after Dr. Oz murdered Joan Rivers.
Yeah.
And Osborne kidnapped me and my twin, and he was gay with Wallace Long, Anderson, and Andrews. They all raped me when I was 4. That's why Terry told me I was the only guy on earth she trusted, because she was protecting little kids on the Great Lakes from them 30 years later.
That's why Oz became a senator right there in the state that Victoria was from.
Well, he's not senator, he's governor now, I think.
No, Dr. Oz, he just ran for Senate.
Oh, is he Senate? I don't know. Against McCormick, right?
Yeah, he beat out McCormick. Yeah.
Well, McCormick was my friend, and if you remember McCormick, he was the head fireman on 9/11, and he called me on my phone as his helicopter crashed into the building where we had our publisher meetings in New York.
Wow.
And I and McCormick worked with Bob Seger's musicians in a union back when I was 24 years old. We worked together for about 5 years. McCormick's my friend, and they murdered Victoria, her father, and her brothers. And they were all born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And their neighbors in Pennsylvania just elected the person who kidnapped me at birth and murdered Joan Rivers. This is how stupid Americans are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if the military is coming onto my property and murdering my family 5 times, what are they going to do to you? I'm related to all the presidents on your money. What are they going to do to you, America? And we're going to end this here, Greg.
All right.
Unless you have anything else to add.
Nah, we better just stop it there. It's a lot for people to consider. So I don't want to add things.
All right. I'm sorry you got booted off of YouTube because I mentioned the coronavirus and the truth of it.
Yeah, well, well, they did. It's ironic that they did that. Notice the cube right here on my book there. That's exactly the symbol that was on, the place in Buffalo. That's their symbol. In that same week.
No,
in that same week.
I know they're marking me with murders to discredit my biography before you finish writing it.
Yeah.
And they got the book off the computer the post office stole from you when you sent it back to me.
Yeah.
I'm well aware of that, Greg.
Yeah. Then the same week they attack the YouTube channel so that I can't put up a video about it for the next week,
Yeah. Well, I'm surrounded by people shooting at the park next door to my house. Take care.
All right.